So I am Dr. Janet Beagle. I am the Managing Director of Graduate Programs here at Purdue University's College of Engineering. And I'm going to be presenting tonight on funding for graduate school. All right, and feel free throughout the presentation to drop any questions you have in the chat. I will wait and kind of answer as many as I can at the end of the presentation. And if there's some that you put in there that I think I covered in the presentation, we'll be able to just skip right over those. But go ahead and feel free to chat in there at any point. So again, welcome to everybody. I'm going to be covering tonight a little bit about the graduate school funding process and how that works, who gets funding, the types of funding, some tips for finding funding, and then how to evaluate funding offers when you are able to get them. And I want to start off by just introducing a little bit of where I am talking to all of you from. So as I mentioned in the intro, and feel free to keep putting those countries and states in the chat where you're coming from. We've got folks joining from all over the country, all over the world, really. But those of you that might not be familiar, I am joining you from Purdue University. We are located in Indiana, which is in kind of the central part of the United States. And Purdue is located a couple hours south of Chicago, Illinois, and about an hour north of Indianapolis. And we do have an extension of our West Lafayette campus now down in Indianapolis that just started up. We're in our second year. I'm really excited about all the things that are happening down in our capital city as well. Purdue University, we've got about 5,600 engineering graduate students, and the photos here are just a couple of shots of some of our engineering buildings. The fountain there is what we call our engineering fountain, because it's in the middle of kind of our engineering section of campus. And then Discovery Park is the inset photo there, where we do a lot of cross-disciplinary, really innovative research. So if you are not terribly familiar with Purdue, I encourage you to learn more about us. Check that out. We are about 50,000 total students. Like I said, about 5,600 engineering graduate students. We are the largest engineering program in the top 10 in the United States. So something we're very proud of. Excellence at scale is kind of our motto, what we go here. So the big takeaway, if you remember nothing else from this presentation, is this idea that there is funding available for graduate education. It's a very different structure than what you might have experienced working towards a bachelor's degree. And here at Purdue, about 70% of our full-time graduate students receive funding. And there is funding that's available both to domestic students as well as our international students that join us here. The big question, of course, is kind of who gets that funding. And it is tiered depending on the type of degree that you are pursuing. So PhD students are going to be the ones who have the most funding options, and close to 100% of our PhD students, if you are admitted into the College of Engineering, you will receive some kind of funding offer from the university as well. And the types of funding that you have the widest variety of funding opportunities. And I'm going to go in a little bit more detail as to what these are. But fellowships, RAs, TAs, GAs, I'm going to define what those are, but for now, just kind of get a sense of these are the degrees that you can get all these different types of funding offers. After PhD students, then your thesis master's students, which are those who are doing research as part of their degree, they also have the same types of opportunities, a little bit less prevalent. Not all of our thesis master's students are funded, but the majority of them are. And then as you continue to work down the scale, then the non-thesis masters, so those who are not doing research as part of their degree, they have less funding offers available to them. At that point, the fellowships and the RAs, which are research assistantships, fall off. Since they're not doing research, then a lot of those doors to research funding start to close. And so their opportunities are more limited to teaching assistantships, general graduate assistantships. At this point, we start seeing people who may be more employer funded, maybe doing a part-time graduate degree while working full-time, or are self-funded, are coming to just gain that additional experience with the expectation that when they finish their master's degree, they're going to be able to step into a higher paying job, and that higher paying job will pay for the education that they just came through. And then the last category that I really want to highlight here is professional master's degrees. And different universities will sometimes refer to these in slightly different ways. Here at Purdue, we call them professional master's degrees. These are degrees that combine kind of a technical degree along with what we would consider professional skills. So you may be taking some MBA courses, for example, combined with your engineering courses. These are popular in certain disciplines, pharmaceutical engineering, for example, where you're taking more professional licensing and accreditation type courses along with the technical engineering courses. And these do not have any funding available with them. And so this is something to be very aware of when you're looking at different graduate programs and the type of program you want to apply to. Any of the programs at Purdue, you want to ask if it's not clear, is this a professional master's program? Because they are not eligible for funding. So those will be self-funded or employer-sponsored typically. So the types of graduate assistantships, I said I would kind of talk through what these different abbreviations mean. So an RA is a research assistantship. And then with that, you're going to be doing research alongside a professor and helping them conduct their research, and you'll receive the benefits of that assistantship with that. A teaching assistantship or a TA is where you are teaching part-time. And this can be actually like lecturing in a class, depending on your comfort, your experience, but it can also be assisting a professor. So doing grading, holding office hours, doing one-on-one tutoring sessions with students, helping in lab sessions, things like that. And those are another really common form of assistantship. And then the last group is called administrative professional. These are abbreviated either AP or just GA for just graduate assistant. And these are harder to find as an incoming student. These are positions that you're more likely to find posted once you are already enrolled as a graduate student. And these are positions that are posted at the university for graduate students to apply for these positions. And these are typically held in an office. Different types of offices around the university that may hire grad assistants could be things like the libraries or the residence halls. Places like my office, so the college administration office, I hire a grad assistant to help maintain our database, right? And it's somebody that has some Python coding skills. I hire them, they help me with coding, with maintaining our database. And so there are different types of positions like that available as well that different offices will offer around the university. So when you think about the benefits of a graduate assistantship, any one of these types, so whether you're talking about a research assistantship, a teaching assistantship, or a general graduate assistantship or administrative professional, they all provide the same types of benefits. They are considered part-time employment. So you are working for the university. You are considered an employee of the university. The terminology that you'll see, half-time means that you're working 20 hours a week. Quarter time means that you're working 10 hours per week. And then in exchange for that employment, you receive free tuition, you receive a paycheck, and then other benefits depending on the type of position, things like paid sick leave, paid vacation, other benefits like that that come along. Health insurance, if you have at least a half-time appointment at Purdue, you will also receive health insurance along with that. So you're typically considered for these appointments as part of admission. So you often do not need a separate application. When you apply to Purdue to be admitted into a graduate program, you are automatically considered, especially for the research assistantships, as part of that admission package. But there can be exceptions to that. There may be some that have a separate application. Some teaching assistantships. So for example, one question I get sometimes is, can I hold an appointment outside of my department? And the answer there is yes. We have a lot of engineering students who TA for the math department or the stats department, or some of our international students may TA over in our languages and cultures area, teaching some of the courses over there because of their background. In those cases, there may be an application as part of that. And so you would need to reach out to those departments and find out what's the application process for applying for a TA. But generally within your own department, if you are applying, for example, to mechanical engineering, you're considered automatically based on your application for admission for any research assistantships and teaching assistantships within that department. These may be awarded for a full year, what we would call a fiscal year. You may see that terminology. That means a full calendar year, 12 months, fiscal year. Can also be academic year, so just during the time that classes are in session. That's very common for a teaching assistantship especially. And they can also be by the semester or by the quarter. We're on semesters here at Purdue, but other universities that are on a quarter system may provide funding just for that quarter. And again, that can be common for teaching assistantships, where you're getting hired on to assist with a particular class for that semester. So one kind of tip here is to contact faculty doing research in your area of interest. So especially if you are looking to do a PhD, then part of that application and admission process, you should be reaching out to faculty members and identifying who may have funding for the upcoming year and building those relationships. And I'm going to talk about that research funding process here in a little bit. Before I jump into that, I want to talk about the other kind of category of funding. So I mentioned at the very beginning, about 70% of Purdue's graduate students are on receive some kind of funding. About 66% of those would be on assistantships, so the vast majority, and that remaining 4% would be on fellowships, right? So the biggest by far percentage of funding opportunities you're going to find in that assistantship bucket. But you should also very much be aware of fellowships. And these are similar to undergraduate scholarships. They're very prestigious, they're very competitive, they're merit-based. And the eligibility benefits and requirements can vary widely. You probably experienced this as an undergraduate with any scholarships you may have applied for, right? They come in all different types of shapes and sizes, and the eligibility can vary widely. They may be internal or external, and that terminology means internal means that it's provided by the university. So we have some fellowships here at Purdue that we give to our incoming top applicants that come in. There are also external fellowships, and these are given by different agencies. It could be government, it could be private foundations. Those you apply for, and then when you receive that fellowship, you can take that money to any university that you choose to go to. A full fellowship will typically include tuition, a monthly stipend or a paycheck, health insurance. There can be additional benefits very similar to an assistantship, right? You get kind of this entire funding package that will help pay for your graduate education. Sometimes fellowships will have additional money for traveling to conferences, or they may provide a small research stipend to help with research that you may want to do. And so these are very lucrative. They're very good to get, both for the financial benefit as well as for the prestige. These are things to definitely have on your resume. Employers really like seeing that you were a fellowship recipient, in the same sense that they like seeing you received scholarships in your undergraduate. It indicates that you were a top student and performing very well, and someone that they would want to hire in the future. There are also what I call partial fellowships, and terminology here is something you have to watch because different places will use different terms. Typically, like for me and for a lot of colleagues that I work with, when we talk about fellowships, we really are talking about those full fellowships where it's paying for your graduate education. But there are different entities that will talk about fellowships that are really more like scholarships, right? You know, they might have travel grants to be able to attend conferences and present your research, right? That's not going to pay for your entire graduate education, but it can help you supplement what you're doing. And so these partial fellowships can also come in a lot of different formats. Some of them act very much like scholarships, where you might get, $3,000, $5,000 that you can apply towards your education. Or they may have things like travel, where you're going to use this money specifically to attend a particular conference and present your research. You generally cannot hold more than one fellowship at a time, but you may be able to use them in sequence. So we have situations sometimes where some of our students who apply to Purdue, we may offer them an internal fellowship from Purdue because they were a very top applicant. And then they also secure an outside fellowship. Maybe they receive an NSF fellowship from the US government. They can't put them together, but they can use them in sequence. They can defer the Purdue fellowship, use the NSF, and then use the Purdue fellowship after that amount of time. My one tip here is that most fellowships are available in the fall. Application deadlines are, for a lot of those external fellowships, are also in the fall. And so when you're looking at applying for external fellowships, you should be applying for them at the same time that you are applying for your admission to the universities that you're applying to. Those application deadlines are often in kind of the October timeframe. Depends on the fellowship, of course, but it's something to be aware of. And then the internal fellowships are also mostly available in the fall. And so if you are someone who is graduating off cycle and applying for like a January start rather than a typical August start, there are not as many fellowships available for that January timeframe. And that's something to be aware of when you're looking at different funding opportunities. The other tip that I would give here is to complete any optional essays on applications. Here at Purdue, we have kind of done away with all of our optional essays. Everything we have on the application now is required for everyone, but it's kind of a general tip and something to be aware of. There are times in an application where there is a piece that's optional, and it's optional because it's not required for admission, and yet it may be required if you want to be considered for funding. And so anytime you see something that's optional in the application, make sure you understand, like, why is it optional? Is it optional just because it's not relevant to everybody, and so I don't need to fill it out? Or is it optional because it's not needed for admission, but it is needed if I want to be considered for funding? And of course, if it is needed to be considered for funding, make sure you're completing all parts of that. So I said I would talk a little bit more about the funding process, and I definitely want to make sure you kind of understand how that research infrastructure works and the funding process here. So as I mentioned, I think a couple times now, you will automatically be considered for some funding when you apply to graduate school. So when the review committees, kind of the way this works, they're reviewing all of the applications and they identify this pool of, these are the students that we are going to admit. And then within that pool, that top kind of 4% that I mentioned are going to be offered fellowships. These are the top students that will receive those fellowships. And then we have a much larger chunk that are going to be offered assistantships, so research assistantships and teaching assistantships. And then the last section there, then basically once the money runs out, then the remaining students may still be admitted, but they are not going to be funded. And as I'd kind of mentioned before, when I went through that other triangle, PhD students are going to be funded first, right? So out of that admitted pool, the PhD students are going to get the funding, then the thesis master students, with fewer non-thesis master students mixed in. You can also apply directly for external fellowships, and we'll talk a little bit more about some sites to look at and some tips on how to actually do that here in just a little bit. And then I had also mentioned this a little bit before, but once you're a graduate student, you may also find administrative assistantships that you can apply for. Look for those job postings once you are already a grad student. So specifically to the research assistantship process, the way this works is based on grant funding that faculty receive from these outside agencies. So faculty will submit grant proposals in order to receive research funds. Basically, a government agency, a corporation, nonprofits, different groups will say, hey, we have this scientific question that we need somebody to research for us. We have X dollars that we are willing to give somebody to research this for us. And who wants to do this? And so faculty will submit their proposals and they'll say, hey, you know, I've got this experience, I've got this lab, I've got this equipment, this is how I would approach this problem. Like, let me help you solve this. Let me look deeper into this. And then if these agencies like what they see, then they will send the money to the faculty member to conduct that research. And then that, of course, is where all of you come in, because those faculty then have this money and they need to do the research. And in order to do that, they will hire all of you to come in and help them conduct that research. And so when you think about applying to graduate school, especially for one of those research-based degrees, and you're looking for a research assistantship, that application is really much more like a job application than it is like an application maybe that you filled out for your undergraduate institution. Because these faculty members are really looking for individuals that they can hire into their lab groups that will help them do the research. And so they're looking for people who have a passion for the types of research that they are doing, who they can work well together with, who have some experience and understand that research process. and can really just demonstrate that, yeah, I have a passion for this. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to come in and work alongside you and get this research done. So then as we look more at those external fellowships, these are fellowships that you apply for directly, and they come from a variety of different places as well. They're often from government, nonprofit, professional organizations. Again, the eligibility benefits, durations, they can really vary. They can be full or partial fellowships. And then one thing that I haven't really mentioned yet, but they may have work or other requirements as part of the fellowship as well. Some entities may provide funding, but then they expect either that you will come and work for a particular company after you are done, or some will have like internship requirements that they'll provide this funding, but they expect you to come and work with them in the summer. Some governments will provide funding for students to study abroad, but the expectation is that you will return to your home country and put that knowledge that you gained to use in that country as part of that fellowship that you receive. And so you do want to be applying for these fellowships 1 year before you plan to start grad school. And the time to start researching any of this is now. Those of you who are not seniors yet, then the time to start reaching this is now, because you want to be ready and to know what you want to do by your senior year. Those of you who are in your last year and getting ready to start the graduate school application process, then now is definitely the time to really be understanding and digging in and looking for any opportunities here to see if you can apply for. So some general tips for finding funding. First off, understand your program's funding process. So I'm giving kind of some general tips, the way stuff usually works, but make sure you are reviewing the websites of the specific program that you are applying to, because each of them may have slight variations in what they are looking for and how they want you to approach either them or the faculty in the department. And then consider what makes sense for your situation. Look at different options, review a list that I'm going to share here with you all in just a little bit. And think about, what are you looking for as part of that graduate school experience? Are you someone who is looking to do research? You want to do research in your career. And so you're applying for one of those more research-based degrees, and you're going to really try to get a research assistantship or teaching assistantship. Are you someone who's more interested in maybe those more professional masters, and you understand you're not going to receive funding for that, but you are going to try to do a program that's a little bit more accelerated, and you're going to be looking for internships and external employment and looking for those job opportunities as part of that. So make sure you know kind of what your goals are, what makes sense for your situation, because it really does vary depending on what you are trying to achieve. And then reach out to faculty before, during, and after applying to grad school. If you are looking for doing research as part of your degree, and those of you who were able to attend yesterday's application presentation with Dr. Coulter, I'm sure she talked about this a little bit too. It's really important to start establishing those relationships with potential supervisors early in the process. And you want to keep your emails very short, very professional, very research focused. Do not just copy paste. That will get you deleted like faster than anything else. Make sure you are really doing your research and address them by name in the email. Give specifics as to why you are really interested in their research. Identify just a couple of faculty that you truly are interested in and email them. Don't email every professor in the school or in the department. Those types of things faculty see all the time. They receive hundreds of emails in a week, just constantly asking them, for funding, or if they're hiring students, or, this kind of, dear esteemed sir, I'm so interested in your research. Like, those types of blanket emails are not going to open a door for you. What you really need to do is look on their websites, read some of their recent journal articles, identify if this is someone who really is doing research in an area that's passionate to you, that this is research you'd like to study for the next 2 to 3 years if you're looking at a master's degree, longer if you're looking at a PhD. And then email them, let them know why you're interested in their research, what skills or experiences you might bring, attach your resume or your CV to that email, and ask if you can have a short conversation with them at some point. You may not receive a reply. Again, faculty receive hundreds of emails every week with these types of requests. but it is amazing to me how much they remember. And so what will happen is you'll email these faculty, maybe you doing your research now, you email them now and you let them know, hey, I'm in the process of applying. Once you apply, just email them again, say, hey, I'm still really interested in your research. Just wanted to let you know I submitted my application. I mentioned you in my application. I'd still love to talk with you to see what opportunities might exist. And what that will do is when they see your application come across their desk, because if you're mentioning them in their application, which you should be, then that will come across their desk. That will be given to them to review. Then they will remember that, oh, this student reached out to me. They were really interested in my research. That was a very professional email. I didn't get a chance to reply, but I remember the name. I'm going to take a closer look at this application. And so even if you're not getting a reply immediately, it doesn't mean that they didn't see it or that they don't care. Sometimes they just truly are really busy. I already mentioned this, but I'll just say it again to mention faculty of interest in your application. And there's a couple places to do this. One, on Purdue's application, there is a place specifically that asks, are there particular faculty you are interested in working with? And you can list 3 to 5 faculty there. You can also mention this in the essays that you write when you're writing your statement of purpose, talking about this is my research. It aligns very well with Professor X's research on this topic. Make sure you are mentioning those faculty that you are most interested in. So just a couple Purdue fellowships for you to be aware of. These are some of those internal fellowships that we offer. So here at Purdue, we've got Ross, Andrews, and Lynn. There are not separate applications for these. So like I mentioned before, you apply with your application for admission, and as faculty are reviewing your application, these are the ones that go into that top pool that they say, hey, we want to nominate the student, see if we can get a fellowship for them. Anyone on here who is a current Purdue undergrad student, there is a fellowship specifically for Purdue undergrads who are continuing their grad study at Purdue. And there is a separate application for this one, right? So I want to call your attention to that. The Charles Chappell Fellowship. If you are a Purdue undergrad applying to Purdue for grad, absolutely you should be applying for this fellowship. The deadline for that is usually around January, but check out this website that I've got on the slide there and just double check that. And then some external fellowship opportunities for you to all be aware of. And feel free to take a quick photo of this or something with your phone if you want to have reference to these links. And I'll try to put a couple of these in the chat when I finish up too. The GEM Fellowship is one that's for US citizens. It's kind of a unique fellowship. It involves an internship component as well as funding for your graduate education. And when you apply to this fellowship, you can also receive an application fee waiver to Purdue. So any of you on here who are US citizens, that's one to look at, especially if you're interested in more of an industry track and you'd be interested in doing kind of internship work alongside your graduate work. The NSF Fellowship, this is one of the most prestigious national awards for US citizens and permanent residents. The call for this year has not been posted yet. They did post the deadlines, which are in October, which makes me think that they might be getting close to sending out the solicitation. There have been a lot of changes, as a lot of you, I'm sure, are aware, with some of the national funding scenes and some of these fellowships. And so there's been some delays in some of the solicitations and the announcements for them. So keep an eye on that website if you are a US citizen or permanent resident and you're looking at doing a research-based degree. This is open to both master's and PhD, but it does have to be a research-based degree. And then for all of our international folks that are on the call today, Education USA is an excellent resource if you're not familiar with them. Check out their website. They've got different information and different lists of funding opportunities. And this is also a great group if you're not used to or not aware of them. They have offices in countries all around the world and just provide support about the application process and the funding process when applying to institutions in the US. So great organization to be aware of if you aren't already. And then just some additional opportunities there. And I will put this link for sure in the chat when I finish up here. This is a list that we have curated and we have it posted up on our website here at Purdue in the College of Engineering. And it's a whole list of different fellowships. I believe we've got over 80 of them out there that you can sort and identify which ones you might be eligible for, and then go ahead and apply. All right, hopefully you guys are still with me. I'm going to shift gears just a little bit. Got just a couple of things to cover, and we're going to be wrapping up here pretty quick. But tips for evaluating offers. So you've kind of gone through this whole process. You understand assistantships, you understand fellowships, you've applied to grad school, you've applied to some external fellowships, you get some funding offers. How do you actually go about evaluating them? And one of the big things that I like to point out is cost of living. And this is something to definitely be aware of as you're evaluating different offers, because there are very wide ranges in cost of living depending on what institution you may be going to. And so you could receive a couple different funding offers from two different universities. One of them on paper may look like a higher offer, but when you go to look to see how much does it actually cost to live there, how much does an apartment cost, how much are taxes, how much am I going to be paying in transportation, what's the scene like there, then it may be that that offer is actually not as high as you first thought when you were looking at that. And so make sure you are always factoring in the cost of living when you are comparing different offers. Other tips for evaluating offers: make sure you understand the whole package. Different funding offers may be written in different ways. You may get you may get kind of a flat dollar amount, but then out of that dollar amount, you have to pay for tuition, fees, other things, or they may break it down and you may be getting X dollars in salary plus tuition and fee coverage. And so make sure when you're evaluating offers and comparing offers, you are doing, we'd say an apples to apples comparison, and that you're really understanding what each offer is giving you. So there can be things like tuition and fee coverage, and those may be grouped together or they may be separate. So here at Purdue, we have tuition, and then we also have fees, and they are separate. And our base packages cover the tuition, and they may or may not cover the fees, depending on the type of offer and the professor that you're working with. So that's something to be aware of, how that works with different offers. They should provide some kind of stipend or salary. And so what is that amount? What are the expenses that you are expected to pay out of this offer, right? So I just mentioned fees is a really good example of that. Are they included? Are they not included? Is that something you're going to have to pay out of this? What are the requirements of the offer, especially with different external fellowship offers? Are there requirements to do an internship or to return to your home country or to pay back a certain amount of something somehow? Make sure you understand what the requirements of the offer is. And then also consider the duration of the offer. Is the offer just a one semester? Is there an expectation that you will be continued to be funded? Is there a guarantee? Is the offer for 4 years? Is the offer for the entirety of your PhD, as long as you are making adequate progress? These are the types of things to look at and the language to watch for in the letters. And then also consider professional development opportunities and fit within the institution, within the program, within the lab group. There are times that maybe an offer is a little bit lower in dollar amount, but there are a lot of opportunities there. Maybe there's going to be a lot of doors that open to you, or, maybe they're going to be able to provide funding for you to go to conferences and present your research. And maybe another offer, looks better on paper, but there's not going to be a lot of opportunities. You're going to really be tied to that one group. You're not going to be able to network broadly. And so factor those types of things into the offer as well. It's not always just about the money. It's about the experience you're going to have during your graduate education and what types of doors and opportunities are going to be open to you during and after that experience. And I can't say enough about fit. You need to be getting along with your lab mates. You need to be in an environment where you feel comfortable, where you can do your best work, where you can really study and concentrate and thrive. And there are places that you go that you just might not like as well. I'm not a big city person. I wouldn't have wanted to go to a university in a big city. That just wouldn't have been a fit for me. Other people, they don't want to be in a rural area. Like they want that urban, energizing environment. And so think about those types of things as well. You're going to be living in this environment for at least a couple of years. And so what is a fit for you? What's gonna be the place that's going to launch your career and the directions that you want to go. And then finally here, it's okay to ask questions. Do not be afraid to ask questions if you're not understanding something in the letter or they don't explicitly state something. You can ask, you can reach out and clarify. You can email the faculty member who is making the offer or the graduate administrator for your program to kind of ask those questions and get clarity. Funding is important, but it is definitely not everything, right? And so this is something to be very aware of. It's something that you need to approach professionally, and you need to put some effort in to securing funding offers and to be aware of what your opportunities are. But just always keep in mind that the highest dollar amount is not always the best path for you. You have to really know what you are looking to get out of this degree. What are the opportunities that you have as you're looking at the different options? So after today, a couple of things, action items that you can put on your list to be thinking about. Take a look at some of the programs that we offer here at Purdue. So if you go to engr.purdue.edu/grad programs, you want to reach out to those programs that interest you. Again, Purdue is the top 10 engineering grad program in the US, and we are actually the #1 producer of graduate engineers in the United States. We're very proud of that. And so there are a lot of great programs here that can help launch you in a lot of different directions. And because we are so large, we do have a lot of networking opportunities, and the folks that you meet around campus are just amazing. A lot of really smart people. If I had like one recommendation for you here as a next step, as an action item, it would be to attend our upcoming Purdue Engineering Virtual Graduate Showcase. This is a fully online, we call it kind of a mini conference that we run. It's coming up September 28th and 29th, so just in like a couple weeks here now. You can scan that QR code, or if you Google Purdue Engineering Grad Showcase, this will also come up. But it's a fully online event. There is free registration, and there's also the opportunity to get a free application fee waiver so that you could apply to Purdue for free. And so if you are thinking about applying to Purdue, and if you're interested in engineering, you should really be thinking about at least applying to Purdue. Then this is a way that you can apply to Purdue for free. As part of that event, you can see the instructions on the website, but as part of that event, there are different like videos or questions that you can answer, and then that will earn you an application fee waiver. So definitely check that out. Go ahead and register now. That is open. We're about ready to open the platform in the next couple of days here. And so there's a lot of what we call pre-conference and pre-watch material out there, topics, information. And then during the actual event, we have representatives from every one of our graduate engineering programs running their own session. And so you can go and learn more about mechanical engineering or electrical and computer engineering or environmental engineering or whatever disciplines you are interested in. And then we also have grad student panels. We've got some folks on that talk about visa related things. We do a career panel as part of this, talking to employers from a couple different sectors about what they look for in graduate students that they hire. So just really great event. We've run this event for a number of years now, and it is definitely our top event of the year that we offer to prospective students. So please check that out as your next steps here. So asking about the grad showcase requirements for getting the application fee waiver, it'll explain it on the website, but basically there is like a quiz you have to answer. And it's based on material that is out on the platform. So it might say, for example, like, go and watch this video and then answer this question. And so it's not hard. It's not anything that we've done that's tricky, but it does demonstrate that you engaged with the material and that you attended in that way. You do not necessarily have to attend the live sessions, although I recommend it if you can fit it in your schedule. They're really good. And then you can ask questions live to the different panelists and hear from them. But you can get the fee waiver by doing just all of the pre-watch content as well. All right, question about the slides, the recordings of these. We will send these out. So if you were registered for yesterday's and today's webinar, the application tips, and then today's funding, we will be sending that out to everybody who had registered. So that will be coming probably in about a week. It usually takes us a little bit of time to download the video and get it posted and then send a link out, but we will send those out to everybody. Another question about if you have a fellowship, can you also still be an RA, TA, or GA? And similar to not being able to put fellowships on top of each other, you usually are not kind of a fellow and an RA at the same time, but it is very common. Often fellowships come as a package. So I'll use one of Purdue's internal fellowships as an example. So our Ross Fellowship, you're basically, it's a 4-year package. But the first year you are on a fellowship, and then the remaining 3 years you are on either a research assistantship or a teaching assistantship. And that's very common. You'll get kind of those funding packages that include both, but not necessarily at the same time. They're kind of run in sequence. The other thing I will say there is pay attention to some of the language in the letter, because there are fellowships that are administered as assistantships, and we have that here at Purdue as well. And so it's a fellowship, but the types of activities that you do are still very similar to what you would be doing as an RA. So you're still often working on research. It's usually research that's related to your dissertation or your thesis that you're interested in as a study or as a student, and then receiving the funding for that. And so it's a fellowship, but the work you're doing is still very similar. That's for like an internal fellowship. An external fellowship, it's more disconnected. You know, you have that money from an outside agency and you're bringing that to the university. And so it is not tied to a specific faculty member or a specific research project. Okay, question about, you know, are the professors who are running the labs the ones who are accepting students for a PhD? And yes, so any of the professors, as you're researching them on their websites, they should be talking about the research. They have their own lab groups. You know, they are the ones that are, you know, writing those grants, and then they are the ones who are hiring the graduate students. They're also the ones who are doing the admission review. And different departments look at this differently. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. These are things that were covered in last night's presentation. But some departments will do more of like a direct to faculty admission process, where individual faculty members will identify students and say, I want to admit this student. I want them to come and work in my lab. Others will do more of a committee review, where they will review all the applications as a committee, identify the students that they want to admit to the department. And then you come in, and that first year you might do a series of rotations, or there might be a matching process kind of once you start the program. So there's a couple different ways that admission can work. Question about what percentage of thesis masters are fully funded. I'm not sure I can give you an exact percentage, but probably about half, roughly. Half of our thesis masters would be funded. Most fellowships are going to be for PhDs. So the question was, are fellowships more for PhDs or masters? Most of them are going to be for PhD. There are a few that are for masters, but they're here at Purdue, like internally, I think we have one. I think we have one fellowship for master students. So they're much smaller number. Are funding decisions made by individual faculty or the admissions committee? And it's going to depend a little bit on the processes that each department uses. So usually for research assistantships, it's going to be the individual faculty that have those grants. Teaching assistantships may be done a little bit more by committee, because the committee is looking at the teaching needs across the whole department and identifying, okay, we need this many TAs. Here's kind of our pool of applicants who might be a good fit for that. But it does vary a little bit. Kind of a GPA question. The minimum at Purdue is 3.0. And so even if you're really close to that, if you are under 3.0, then you would not be eligible to be admitted. If you email a professor and they don't reply, is it still okay to continue the application? Absolutely. You know, there's plenty of times, like I said, that faculty are just too busy. It's also possible that that particular faculty member that you reached out to is not taking on students, but maybe there's somebody else in the department who is. And so you can always still apply, see what opportunities there are, see if you are admitted. Okay, do students usually get involved in multiple assistantships or one, or will it depend? That's the best like grad school answer, right? Depends. Everything depends. So yeah, it does kind of depend. Usually though, over the course of your graduate career, you're probably going to have a couple of different types of funding scenarios. This isn't always the case. There are students that come in and you're hired into one lab group and you are just on an RA with that one lab group for the entire time, and that's it. But it's fairly common, I would say, that there's at least like one semester where you might TA or do some other types of work alongside that RA. Usually when you come in, you don't do a lot of different types of RAs because usually your research assistantship is connected to the professor who's your major advisor for your academic research as well. It doesn't always have to be. You can be doing an RA with a different professor, but most commonly, 90+% of the time, your academic advisor is also going to be your research assistantship advisor as well. And so the type of research that you're doing is connected between your academics and your employment. And so usually you are in that RA for that length of time. It doesn't mean that you're only doing one project, because especially if you're working on a PhD, there can be a lot of different projects that the types of funding and grants that your professor might get, they might have some short-term projects. And so you might be working on that project and then they get another grant and you're working on that other project. And so depending on how you want to define a different RA, it's all one RA. You're still working with the same supervisor, but the actual projects that you're working on can vary a little bit, especially if you're working on a PhD and you're here for a longer period of time. All right, we got questions for a couple more, or time for a couple more questions here. Let's see. Does taking the GRE help? This is definitely a departmental specific thing. There are some programs that still require the GRE, and so that's something to look on the application and the admission requirements there. If they list that it's not required, then taking the GRE is not going to necessarily help your chances for funding, but that it will vary. Some do still look for the GRE, and so those that request it will be looking for it. Okay, a couple questions about specific departments. Now, I'm not going to be able to answer those because I'm not in those departments. And so what I would really encourage you to do is to come to that grad showcase when we have each of our departments presenting, and you can ask questions of them directly about what it's like. A general question here about learning the culture of a department when you're applying and trying to get a sense. In addition to reaching out to faculty, you can also reach out to the graduate students that are in that lab. And so they may be posted on the website if you're looking at a particular lab group. You can also, if you start having a conversation with a professor and it looks like there's potential for there to be a fit there for the research that's going on, you can ask that professor if he or she can recommend a couple grad students in their lab group to talk with. And that's a great way to get a sense of what it's really like from the grad student perspective and what that faculty member is like as a supervisor. For those of you that are in the US, when you are admitted to a program, a lot of these programs will have admitted student visit weekends. And so you are able to come to campus. And I absolutely strongly encourage you to do that. If you're admitted to a couple different programs and you're trying to decide which one you want to go to, visit those campuses because you can tell often very quickly, just what does it feel like? Is it a fit for you when you step on that college campus, when you meet the other grad students in that lab? What is the feeling there? And is it a place that you want to spend some time? So I always encourage students to reach out to grad students in the lab and to do campus visits when you are able to do that. All right, with that, we are nearing our time here. So I'm going to wrap this webinar. As I had mentioned before, we will send out the recording to everybody who registered. So watch your email for that. Hopefully this was helpful information for you. Definitely check out those websites. come to our grad showcase. I think you'll get a lot of good information out of that. And otherwise, have a great evening or a great day. Those of you who are on the other side of the country, appreciate you joining me here. And we look forward to all the great stuff you're going to do in the future. So, thank you.